Welcome. Welcome to the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Let's start with Mohammed to introduce ourselves.
Ali Remlawi, Council Member, 5th Ward.
Julie Grand, Council Member, Ward 3.
Sorry.
That's okay. Pam Dent, Commissioner.
Leslie Stambaugh, Commissioner and Chair.
Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
Corinne Moore, Commissioner.
Vivian Chang, Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Margaret Radebaugh, Staff Liaison.
Thank you, and thank you guys for coming. No one has signed up for public comment, so we will begin with administrative issues, like the agenda. Any comments on the agenda? Motions to accept?
I'll move to accept.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? I ended up having a emergency crown this morning, and my brain is, so excuse me. Minutes, January minutes. Does anybody need a copy? Thoughts about the minutes, discussion? Is there a move to approve the minutes?
Move to,
Motion?
yes, move to
Green.
approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It's going to be a fast meeting, perhaps. Meeting room update. Margaret.
All right, so I received a request from Leslie to schedule the remainder of this year's meetings to the basement. I am working with Heather, who's set up the schedule in the clerk's office to try and change that. So I know next month is in the basement already, but there's
good.
a few months that I need to address.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. We are hoping to be in the basement so that we can have more, not so much distance from the audience, and that we look like a panel of experts or something. As a Human Rights Commission, we'd like to be more interactive. Meeting membership update. I want you all to know that after we've had 2 open positions now for a little bit of time, but we now have the mayor has put 2 people's names in before council, Dilip Das and Diana Cass. And suppose they will probably be approved at the next meeting, and we will have a full house, and that will be nice. I also want you to know that the HRC ICPOC, is that what we're going to call it, do you think? The Independent Community Policing Oversight Commission. We are going to share an assistant, and that person, those applications are in, I think, and interviews are being scheduled soon. So my question here is, who else wants to join me to listen to interviews when they get scheduled?
Are there dates for that?
There are no dates. It'll probably not be,
Oh, good.
it's not going to be this week, and it's not going to be next 2 weeks, or
Okay.
it's going to be soon, though. And we'd like an assistant.
I can probably
I'd be glad
attend.
to also.
Thank you. I want to update you on a guest public comment that happened at our last meeting. Somebody came and talked about a situation with a mentally ill person and the police, and an interaction which made it sound like the police were being used by other neighbors to harass this person, and that the person was not really it really wasn't a police issue. And it was a very interesting comment because it is something we hear a lot. But I did talk to Deputy Chief Forsberg, and he happened to be at one of these interactions and said interesting thing, as the person who brought this to our attention said as well, that at the time he came, the issue was a serious issue, and the police were needed, and it was a police issue. But he hadn't been to the beginning of this cycle of calls, and it may very well have been a mental health problem that then started escalating, and now this person feels really harassed by police and is scared. And when you have a situation where the person is scared, you have a dangerous situation. But what he said was I was happy to hear, and it was that they are working a lot more closely with the housing. It's a housing that has a lot of people who have mental illness, and with mental professionals to try to make this different and to make it so that the police are not called as first resort. And I was glad to hear that they'd recognize the problem, not just for him, but for, in general. And I think it's a problem that we've heard also a number of times. So it looks like they might be making some progress on that, and I just wanted you to know that. But we ought to keep at it, and I did tell the person who came here to talk what I'd found out. There are two things that we might be seeing in the future, and I wanted Corinne to introduce one of them. And it has to do with a change that might take place in the non-discrimination ordinance.
Okay, we're going to talk about that now?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the complaint process, we had a situation where there was a complaint indicating that a landlord was discriminating against tenants who received Section 8 voucher assistance. And we investigated, and there are a lot of situations where landlords can easily discriminate against Section 8 tenants because people receive Section 8 based on how much income they have generally. And usually people who receive Section 8 are more vulnerable, they're less likely to have the same resources as other people. As we know, housing in the city of Ann Arbor is pretty expensive. And we investigated, we were able to resolve the complaint, thankfully, but we also think that our ordinance could be more protective, because the issue was where the ordinance protects against discrimination based on source of income. Does Section 8 actually qualify as something that is discrimination based on source of income? And it could be clearer. We think the language in the ordinance could actually be stronger. And we are working with advocates with the, the Washtenaw Housing Alliance, who are also interested in this issue, because obviously we want to build more affordable housing, we want to remain welcoming, we want to ensure diversity in the city. We think that we can easily strengthen the language of the ordinance. Hopefully we can work with the city attorney as well to come up with some language that makes it more clear and makes it more difficult for landlords to discriminate against tenants who receive Section 8. So that's something that I hope we can work on in the future.
When do you think that's going to come up? Any idea?
I think we have to talk to the city attorney. I know that the individuals at the Washtenaw Housing Alliance, and also there's attorneys at Legal Services who already have some ideas based on other states.
And that's what I was waiting for their
Yes,
suggested definitions. We're supportive of it as well. So
yes.
Stephen was saying if we can get out in March, he'd
Yeah,
fine with that as
absolutely.
well.
So I'll coordinate that, and I know that they're going to put it on the agenda with the Washtenaw Housing Alliance as well, because I'm not sure who the key players are, but they want to make sure it's active on their agenda.
So you're all, you're all.
Yes, and so I
Excellent.
was like, I'll put it on our agenda, and so now it's officially on our agenda, and so we'll get the language and send it over to the city attorney so that
Yeah.
you guys have some idea of what we think is workable.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
No, but
I just
think
had a question. So I'm liaison to the Ann Arbor Housing Commission.
Oh.
And what is have they been looped into any of these conversations?
Yes, they were a part of the conversation from the beginning, I guess it's fair to say. We
Jennifer
try
was
not-
involved and made aware of the initial
Right.
complaint, because she had come over to speak to our office as well.
We try not to discuss who complains,
No,
right?
she didn't complain, I just know
Right,
she's aware of the
right,
complaint.
right, yeah. She, yeah,
Okay, so
very
just-
aware from
just-
the beginning.
Yeah, so if there's any, we meet, I think, next week, so if there's anything that you'd like me to pass along, please feel free to
Oh, yeah.
do so, and I'm happy to update them on where.
Yeah,
we
I'm
are
sure
and-
they would appreciate
I
it
think,
because
yes.
they come, yeah, they come across these issues all the time and their hands are tied because the law is the law and people are easily priced out and they can only pay so much. So this will actually be very helpful. And there's interesting language that I didn't think of. I was like, oh, great. So I'm actually really excited about it because it was like, I didn't know that we could, you know. So I'm excited about it, and you'll see when you get the proposed language, so.
Thank you, that's great.
Good, sounds great. Anything else on that issue? There is also, it turns out, a city equality effort going on, or starting, and it is with Sherry Sell as head. And Sherry Sell is somebody who we know because she was a staff assistant to us years ago and interested in these issues. And Sherry contacted me and asked if we can talk about ways we can cooperate, and I said, sure. So we will be doing that, and you'll probably hear about that at the next meeting. And if anybody wants to come with me to that one, you're welcome to.
Is there a date?
There, yes, there probably is a date, actually. The date is the 11th, March 11th at 9 o'clock in the morning. Will that work for you, or?
And who's that with? Just
Sherry Sale,
Just
yeah,
Sherry.
I think so. Anything else on that subject? Trespass revisited.
Excuse me?
Yep,
I think we missed two things on the agenda.
could be.
First
easily.
of all, the strategic planning date, and second of all, the racial equity job post. I don't think we talked about either of those things.
Yes, yeah, and I didn't, I realized that I'd put them on the agenda, and they're not very big, but we can talk about them. Do you have something you want to say about them, or you just want me to mention them?
They're on the agenda before trespass, so I just thought.
Okay, oh, I think, I appreciate that. They weren't on the formal one, so I looked at it and, here. I sent you all this flyer from the Washtenaw County Racial Equity Office, I guess. And they're hiring a racial equity officer, and there will be a meet and greet of the final candidates, so it doesn't look like this is an open job opening. It's already been, you know, they've already had some selection. But there's a meet and greet on February 25th. There's a public presentation at 5 to 8, and from 8 to 8:30, which I assume is at night, there's a meet and greet, and it is, well, you've got the flyer. But it is, it's in the Racial Equity Office in the county institution. County institution. Office in the county institution. Okay. I guess, at any rate, you have the flyer, and it is online. So other people who are listening could also attend. The other one was the strategic planning. I had strategic planning on there. I realized that it'd probably be smarter if we waited for the two new people to come on board, so I took it off. But if you have something you want to say about that, that's also okay. As
no,
I said, my brain is really kind of foggy today.
Yeah, no,
so-
it was just on both copies
Okay.
of my agenda, so I was wondering.
Okay, I appreciate that. I should have made a new copy of this, but I did this at the last minute. Made some changes in the last minute. So we're down to trespass again. So there's a new local ordinance. I think I sent you a I know I sent it to you before it was approved, and I think I just sent you the new ordinance with meeting materials. If I didn't, I will. It has the same wording as the state ordinance had, but it has a lot of advantages. And Arian Slay gave a very clear description of what the differences will be for the enforcement of the new ordinance, and made it, I think, so clear that there wasn't any dissent at all, or even discussion. It just was passed, and it should have been passed. It's a no-brainer, and will be a big help. That puts into place one of the pieces that we need for trespass that we've had a lot of discussion about over the past, and a lot of things we wanted to change. And in fact, that's the thing we had. Arian did that. She saw the problem and she acted on it, and she did a fabulous job. But that isn't something we deserve any credit for. We do deserve credit for the changing of the trespass form, and I understand that a draft of that has been circulating, but Arian has not sent me a copy of it yet.
I can write that down today.
Okay.
I've seen it, I know the city administrator's seen it, police chief and Ariane, so it has gone around.
So is it, you think it's near final? Or, okay, it sounded very good, what we heard, but we wanted to see the actual form, and I think
I can get you a copy of that.
thank you. I didn't think to ask you. I did ask Erin, she just didn't. She's
Has she
probably
sent-
kind of busy, huh?
Has she sent us the AAPD policy 041-026 yet?
Say that again.
AAPD policy 041-026.
041026,
This was the trespassing.
huh?
041-026.
Okay.
This was a trespassing internal policy that interim police chief Fannis mentioned last year. And he said that he would get back to us about whether or not we could see that policy. We haven't seen it yet, and in January, we asked again if we could see it.
Good.
And Ariane Slay said that she didn't see any reason why we couldn't see it, but I still don't think that we've seen anything yet. And I
We
think it's
haven't.
been almost a half a year, if not more.
Okay. I will inquire and get it. My question to you is, just so that I can start planning for it if we say yes, is, we talked last time about the need for people to know, to have a place to go to find out about trespass, that it was a complicated issue, and that the community needs something that is readable, that tells them what to do if they have read trespass, what their rights are, what trespass means, et cetera. They clearly didn't have a way to do that, and our mandate says that we educate, and so I thought we could do it. We talked a little bit about it. There seemed to be some enthusiasm. I'd like a vote that says we're willing to take this on. I don't think it's a big deal, but I think it's something, and it's not quite ready. We really need a finalized form, and we need to know probably exactly the process of the trespass, the criminal trespass, how they're going to handle the new ordinance, what they're going to do when a person is charged with trespass, exactly how it'll look. And Ariane gave a really good description, so I think they've got it in place. We just need all the pieces. But are we willing to take that task on? And who would be willing to do it? Other than me. Including me.
This is educating the public.
That's what it is.
I would be willing.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we can do it. And we don't have all, you know what? We've got 2 new people coming. They will be willing, perhaps. Okay, so I'm going to start process. Does anybody have any objections to our doing it?
As long as the information that's being shared is completely accurate.
Oh, yes. No, we would have to go through both the legal department and the police department to make sure that we're saying everything that we are accurate.
I will add that, I mean, I'd be glad to sort of add the stuff, whatever we come up with, to our website, since I've been sort of
Okay.
managing the website.
Okay.
In that respect, I'm happy to help.
That's maybe the biggest thing.
A webpage, I should say, on the city's website.
This is the kind of place where I think a Facebook page would help, because I think it's more accessible. We might want to consider pushing for that again. I'll see. Okay. Now we are to the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. What has been done so far, and what are our next steps? Let me just sort of talk to you for a minute about what's been done so far, and people can then talk about, we can find out what's going to happen from, with our liaisons, and then we can discuss it. But I thought I'd better give an overview, especially for the audience. We started taking applications in mid-December for the 11 open positions in the new commission called Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. There was a 1.5 months of time where people could apply for this position. And during the, about a third of the applicants applied during the last day. It was amazing. That's about 20 people, 25 people. 62 people actually, 62 eligible applicants actually applied. And so we got a very good turnout. The Human Rights Commission's role in this, according to the ordinance, was to recruit applicants and reach out to people in our community who don't usually volunteer so that they can attract the kind of diversity for the commission that the commission really needs. We did everything we could to educate the community about the new commission and the opportunity to serve, but the effort was actually very much citywide, and we have a lot of people to thank, including City Communications Department headed by Lisa Wandrish, the city leadership who talked to their constituents and talk the commission up, referred people to us. Our intern, Jordan Jones, actually contacted a lot of relevant nonprofits around the city, and they posted flyers, and they handed out applications, and they referred people that they respected to the membership. Lori Saginaw held meetings where people plotted ways to get more people involved, and I'm sure they made a big difference. And the media that we keep saying we don't have media in Ann Arbor, the media came through here. They really did. We got lots of coverage. As a result, we've got 62 eligible applicants, all of whom were amazing, and a little over half of whom are persons of color. The pool could have been more diverse, and next year we hope, or the next time there's an opening, we hope it'll be even more diverse. We had, for example, little or no applicants from either East Asia, Asian community, or the Hispanic communities. And as the best educated city in America by some rankings, our applicant pool is still pretty well educated. On the whole, probably a lot more than you'd find in most other communities. On the other hand, Human Rights Commission's role is not to select members, only to give input to the people who do. And the people who do, according to the ordinance, are the 4 liaisons, 2 of them to the Human Rights Commission, Julie Graham and Ali Ramwali, and the 2 liaisons to the new commission, Zach Ackerman and Jane Lung. But the selectors asked us to give them input. and we are giving them input, but we're not making a selection. How did we do that? Members of the Human Rights Commission have devoted enormous amount of time, if you can imagine, 62 applications, and quite, a lot of people wrote quite a bit. And we individually assessed each applicant independently. Because it was, whoever gets the first, serves during the first term is going to be very influential to how this commission goes over time. They're setting precedent. And we're very clear that it's important that this commission be effective and fair-minded and neutral and independent. And so those are our criteria. Who can do that? That's our goal. What we found was, and I think we'd all agree, that the 62 people who applied were very neat people. Many of them have been concerned about, and even maybe have been working with, the kind of issues that this new commission will be dealing with. Communication, law enforcement, bias, conscious or unconscious, mental health, drug and alcohol, abuse, poverty, respectful treatment of all people regardless of where they come from or who they are, and building a stronger community in Ann Arbor. So the last question in the application was sort of telling. Last question said, should your application for membership not be selected, your experience, skills, and perspectives may still be valuable as a potential resource for the commission. Would you be willing to provide some assistance to the commission should such help be needed or required? So we're asking people not only to volunteer, but to be on call for this commission, just because they provided such great resources. And we didn't want the commission to lose the potential of being able to draw on them. And almost, maybe every single one of them, I didn't see anybody who said no. And a lot of people said yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of commitment there. So once again, the city is faced with an embarrassment of riches. 62 applicants for 11 positions, and a need to identify a unique set of competencies among them. And our recommendations, when we set a cutoff point, and that's something we have to do today, will help us reduce that pool from 62 to maybe 20 or 30. But it still will take a lot of work. As always, on a city commission, the Human Rights Commission had to do this vetting of applicants in a way that would be compliant with the Michigan Open Meetings Act, where all discussions like this have to be done in public. If these people were employees, the law would allow them to allow the employers to discuss it in private and make their decisions. But these are not employees, and the law does not allow us to do that. So we would have to, if we were going to do it in public, we'd have to discuss the pros and cons of each applicant and make decisions publicly. But these volunteers are more at risk in some ways than if they were employees, because a list of all the applicants was published in their city and is widely accessible by everyone in the city. So anything that was said, actually, even if we use code names, would be pretty easily identifiable and risk the possibility of everything from just discomfort to legal action. We needed to be respectful of these applicants, and we did this in as fair and respectful and honestly reflective way that we knew how to do, to figure out who are the best candidates. We combined our individual assessments in a way to give each of us, minus Corrine, who has applied for membership and has recused herself from the task, to arrive at a ranked pool of applicants. And we hope the selectors will draw from and only need to decide how many, and we only need to decide how many we want to recommend. So one of the things I want to leave with today is some sense of what our cutoff point is, just so that we say that these are the people we want the most to be.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
How many people were on the task force again? It was 11 on the task force?
Yes,
How many people are going to be on the ICPOC? Is it 11 again?
yes,
Okay.
yes, but we had, I think we had 30 applications for the task force. So this is at least twice as hard. So we have, the one thing we have to decide is the cutoff point. But is there any discussion about the process? Is there anything else you want to tell the people about what we've done? No. We have,
It seems like there's a question.
I'm sorry, I was late and missed public comment time. I don't know if it would be okay to ask a question.
I think it'd
Yeah.
be fine.
Ask for a waiver, we can do-
Thank you, sorry. And it's also helpful to get the update first anyway, just so I'm not saying things that you're already covering. So I was on the task force, and so first, I remember the discussion of who was going to receive the applicants, so just to thank you all so much, as I do imagine that is quite a feat. And it was really a wonderful thing to know at the time on the task force that you were all willing to do that. I'm really grateful for that. So one of my questions is, so considering that the selection process is not happening publicly, is there any way for the public to know what is there a template that you're using to assess the candidates and for people to know what that might be, like what you're using as, things that you're looking for, what you're valuing, and just so we know, like, these are the people that you're finding that fit certain assessment categories that you're looking for? No way for the public to know about that?
So unfortunately, I think like we did for the task force, we all sort of used our own individual criteria. There wasn't a set criteria. There wasn't a checklist of things that we should each be looking at. And so we each took it individually and used our own criteria. And so I can't necessarily speak to what other people looked at the list with an eye for. I can only speak for myself, and so it was pretty individual.
Okay.
I would add, though, that I think we've all read the ordinance, and we see in the ordinance what it says the membership should be composed of, what kinds of groups should be represented, and we all took that in mind. And, the ordinance talks about not only people you know. I mean,
That's
Well,
right.
it actually wasn't the task
But it
force's
talks about
ordinance,
different
so I don't fully know it as well, because it wasn't the one we developed, but.
Having a variety of competencies and skills, as well as representation from, marginalized, over police, I forget exactly what words they use, community. So, I think we all knew that, and we all evaluated with that in mind.
And not only that, we wrote the report, and we all wanted that to begin with, so we were very happy with that.
I mean, I think that it is important to note that also, though, that after the task force voted on its ordinance and presented it to City Council, that as a group, the Human Rights Commission looked at that ordinance, and we split pretty significantly on some of the major proposals about candidacy and who was qualified to be on the ICPOC. And so there will be a difference of opinion amongst us, too.
Sure.
And so, like, that discussion, so the selected, right now, I know that the list is online. Is that all the 62 people
Yes.
that's online? Okay. And so once that's narrowed down, that will also be public, the list
Yeah, oh,
that's
yeah,
given
then
to the
you'll-
four?
They'll have the final list.
No, I think she's asking if our slate of candidates will be made public.
And I don't know about that. We might have to decide on that.
I think it might make sense because that's what we did last time with the task force.
We could make.
think so.
We could,
The difference in this
Say
case,
that.
and I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't, is that we are not the deciders. We made the selections. Well, no, the mayor made the final selection. In this case, we're not really technically even supposed to be doing this under the ordinance. It's just that the four liaisons asked for our input. Technically, that the task force tried to get us to be the deciders, and we're really not. So it's, in some ways, I feel like it's almost up to the liaisons to tell us what they want us to do with with the list we come up with. That's my view.
But wouldn't that be our choice to make, whether or not we want to make it public?
Well,
It's
yeah,
not
there we-
something that they can
Something to talk
dictate.
about. It's something to talk about.
Yeah.
And I guess just so you know, the perspective from the community about wanting to see that is partly like what happened with the task force, where there were people who didn't actually go through that full application process that then ended up on the task force, and so that created like a sense of distrust about the process. So to make sure that the names that are reappearing on these lists are names that have been on all the lists, and then, you know, to kind of retain that trust from the community would be important. So I guess that would be why I would just like support the idea of continuing to publicize these lists so that people who are watching can feel like there's some transparency around that.
I've also heard a lot of personal feedback from the community that one of the reasons that they did want the HRC involved in the first place is because they really valued our transparent process in selecting the task force.
Yeah.
And they thought it was, you know, important for them to be able to know who we chose and what our thought process was. And so to the extent that the community wanted us to be involved in the first place, I think publicizing our slate of candidates would honor that request for us to be involved.
Yeah, and the part that wasn't transparent about the task force wasn't on, as far as my understanding, that wasn't part of what HRC did. That happened later when it was.
Yeah.
When it
I'm
was,
still trying to think of who got on it that wasn't, but
So,
Never mind.
anyway, so yeah, just that we do, and that is, so in any way that you guys can stand for that transparency, we would really appreciate it, even if it, kind of, I think, in any way that you can use the power that you have to make it as transparent as possible, even though you're not making the final decisions. So even posting, things like to even hear, we're assessing things like neutrality and stuff, that's like really important for the community to know that that's your assessment. I think there's a lot of debate about whether or not we'd want that to be the assessment of people getting to represent the community in this particular arena. But for the community to know that that's part of what's being sought after is really, really essential. So.
well, one of the things that you're getting here is each one of our different sets of criteria, and some were more rigid than others about having a set to begin with, but we all, I think, all have a vision. But if we put down our sets, one of the things you'd see is the diversity of sets, which is also entered into the diversity and gives us different, and we average them all together.
And so, well, potentially then, I don't know if this is, but a potential way to make that transparent is for each of you to share what your sets are, so that we, know individually how you're looking at the applicants. That could be like a way to address that transparency, even if there isn't one solid agreement about that, that each one of you would present, like, this is what I'm looking for.
So by sets, you mean like what we were thinking of, like what values we were prioritizing when we were going through the applications? I think that would be appropriate. That's not talking about
that makes
individual
sense.
applicants. It's
Yeah.
just talking about how we rated them.
Do you want to do that here, or do you want to
I
do
think
that?
I think that was the point, right? That you want that to be public.
Yeah, so either here or posted online, so we could point people to the recording of this meeting, or we could point people to online.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the big downfalls with the way we conducted the process this time around is I did think it was really valuable when me, Pam, and Rick sat down last time and got to actually engage in some substantive discussion about some of the
Yes.
applicants, because maybe the two of us would disagree about something, and in talking through some of it, like we would resolve any like
Right.
minor conflict we might have, and it really helped me like crystallize what I was looking for, and so we really lacked that sort of substantive discussion. But it'd be nice to at least
That would,
get our thoughts down and
Yeah.
talk about what we were looking for.
yeah, no, I agree. Does everybody want to do that? Are you comfortable doing that now? Or
Can
do
I
you-
just speak to one
Sure.
question that came up? I can assure you that with 62 applicants, I don't anticipate any coming in from off of that list. We had plenty of qualified people from which to draw from, so.
Yeah, I don't
There-
think people anticipated it from the task force
Ye-
either, and it happened late in the
yeah, but-
process, so we'll
but-
just root for that being the case.
I mean, I'm one of the people deciding, and we have met already, and that has not come up of this idea of bringing someone else in who wasn't on the list. I think we were, I can just speak for myself, impressed and humbled by the people who were on that list and who were willing to give so much time to the community. I also think that the interview question, or not the interview questions, but the application questions themselves speak a lot to what this group's values were and what they were looking for. So there is a transparency there in the application being public and the application coming from this group. It wasn't the four of us that picked the questions, it was the HRC that picked the questions. So there, for example, I'm gonna pick one that's more benign, but willingness to commit time. That was a question that was on the application, and it was one that there might be a really great shiny applicant, but when I'm looking at it and they don't have time to dedicate to this task, well, then they may not rise as high on my list, because we need people, especially in this first year, who can dedicate time to the task.
Yeah, so that would be the kind of interesting thing to know, is who's measuring like what qualifications as most important, even if they're based
Right.
on the
That's
application.
not the most important, that's just
Right.
It counts,
easy to
though.
explain the point.
Yeah, and just like the more of this that's transparent, the better it goes for everyone, and the less concerns we have about what's happening. And I think even just like, I came here tonight actually expecting to hear discussion about the candidates, so even that already is like, ooh, so those are happening like somewhere else, and then everyone has their own opinion about those things, so it feels a little bit concerning in those ways. So just any way that you might be able to share more information so that we can
Okay.
feel clued in and knowing what's going on.
Okay, well,
Thank you, and
Am I-
thanks for letting me engage in that discussion.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
am I hearing everybody comfortable talking about that now?
Yes.
Well, then, this is the last thing on our agenda, why don't we do it? Vivian?
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
think
are- we are short.
Dwight is the only one who
Yeah.
voted who were
That's right.
short. Right.
That's right.
Right. So speaking from my perspective, I was involved in the subcommittee for selecting the task force, and also for the broader discussions in selecting the task force as well. I used a lot of the same criteria that I had when looking at task force members. I definitely wanted people with the lived experience of being historically being in communities that have been historically targeted by the police. I obviously value professional experience with those communities as well, but I thought that lived experience was preferential, and we were lucky to get a large number of candidates who had both. The lived experience of being in those communities and had professional experience with being in those communities too. I also really valued historical commitment to the issue too. Obviously, I'm thrilled that MLive and the city's e-resources really publicized this application and this process, but I did recognize a lot of names from local activists or community members who have obviously been very engaged and have put in the time and effort into engaging with the city, engaging with the community on these issues, and who have done quite a good job on that. And I think, past performance is a good predictor of future success, and so I valued that quite a lot as well. I also was one of the individuals on the HRC who agreed with the task force original recommendation that they did not want anyone on the ICPOC to serve who had prior experience working in a police department, and that did enter into my calculations of who I was recommending as well. And it was important for me, as someone with a public defense background, and to see whether or not we had anyone on to see whether or not there was any attorneys or any people with that sort of background on the ICPOC, and so I was interested in that as well, although that wasn't necessarily the sole indicator for some of these applications for me either. But, so I looked at a lot of those factors, and I guess that's the best way of explaining my thought process.
Thank you. Corinne? Oh, never mind.
Yes. So, I would echo most of what Vivian just said, so not to repeat it, but, I gave a lot of people high scores because there were a lot of good candidates. And what will matter as well as the individual candidates is the mix of people. So I'm hopeful that, although we'll be giving a larger than 11-person list to the 4 selectors, that they will choose from the list that we are giving them a mix of people who meet the criteria that, as I said, are stated in the ordinance, and I kept those criteria in mind when I was looking. But it's true also what Julie said, you have these outstanding candidates who you think, wow, great, 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 great. Oh, they can only give 2 hours a month. Well, this is going to be a lot more work than that. So, immediately they got a lower score in my book. So it's these red flags that you look for when you're looking at these applications. I do believe that it should have at least some people on it who are neutral in terms of their views toward the police and the people being police, in the sense that I'm a mediator. So I think it's important to have some people who can see both sides, can listen to both sides, keep as an open mind as possible, while also having some members who perhaps have a really negative view of police because of experiences they've had. I think it's okay to have both, and maybe it's important to have both. So I kept that in mind too. But again, in the end, it's finding that great mix. So so we'll be giving the 4 liaisons, I don't know if it's 20 or 30 names, and I'm talking to them and hoping that they will have some good combination of those. It's a little tricky while evaluating individuals to know, like, we as a group can't determine the final perfect mix, but we can give a group of people to the 4 liaisons who can hopefully come up with that will reflect what's in the ordinance in terms of what the composition should look like. And the other thing I would add is that, unlike the task force, this isn't a one-shot deal, right? Some of these people are going to be on for 1 year, being renewed if they want, some for 2, some for 3, and then hopefully this commission will go strong for a long time. So a lot of these other people who are applying now can be on it in the future. It's not a one-shot deal. Right. It's, the first year, and then there will be vacancies. People will come, people will go, people can apply. The next time around, there are not likely to be 62 applicants. So if people want to reapply, they're more likely to get on, I would imagine, the next time around. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
You want to go next?
Sure. I echo the sentiments of my co-commissioners in terms of what I use to review and assess and evaluate each of the applicants. But I did it a little bit differently, or it may have been the same. I'm not sure exactly the process that they used, but this is what I did. I tend to be somewhat anal in discharging certain responsibilities, and I felt that this warranted that because I believe it is too significant and extremely important for our city to get it right. We've already, from the incident that occurred in the city till now, expended a lot of time. We're working on 4 years to get to this point. And I think that whatever time it took to assess and evaluate those who expressed interest in wanting to be a part of this commission, that it needed to be looked at carefully. So what I did was to list each of the applicants, and then if I knew from their response their gender or culture, I listed that. If I didn't, it was a question mark. And then I had an occupation miscellaneous category so that I could review that information side by side with their application. And then I listed towards the end if they were from a specific ward, because I wanted to ensure that at the end of that assessment, there was an excellent representation not only from each ward, if applicable, or a parent, that there was a good cross-section of those from gender as well as race or culture, and then also what they brought to the table, so that there was a very good representation of diversity in those that I would recommend. From that, I then evaluated them in terms of, absolutely, I think this person would be an excellent representative on the commission, to this person could certainly add value to the commission if selected, or perhaps not now, but maybe sometime in the future, this or these other persons could bring to the table something that would be unique to the commission, the Police Oversight Commission. And then I didn't, from that list, I just listed all 63, one being disqualified, and said, here's my assessment, and forwarded on to our chair. So I didn't further define any top 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50, or 60. I just simply put it in an Excel spreadsheet and said, here's my assessment and evaluation, and here's what I have determined based on what each candidate brought to the table. I would echo the sentiments of the comments that have been made, in that we had an excellent response to individuals expressing interest in wanting to be on this commission. I don't envy the 4 who will have to narrow that down, because it will be difficult. But as my colleague has said, this is not a one-shot deal, and those who may not make the cut initially can certainly be considered for future consideration. I am pleased to see that we have so many people who are interested in this subject matter and want to make a difference. And I'm anxious to see how that will shake out with those who are ultimately determined to initially start that process. What I like also is the fact that there is a designated commission that will handle this responsibility. But I also like the fact that the HRC, even though we won't have direct responsibility, we will certainly have, in some respects, an oversight of the Oversight Commission. And what I mean by that is a lot of what has gone into where we are now can be directly attributed to the efforts of those of us on the commission. Not entirely, of course, but certainly we've had a lot of input. I've been involved from the beginning, even before it was determined that Hillard Hines was selected to assess and evaluate if there was even a need for an oversight commission. I chaired the task force, the selection of the task force persons, and from there we were able to identify individuals who did a phenomenal and excellent job in bringing to the table the ordinance that is now in existence. And so now we're at the point where we're going to actually create and establish, have input in creating and establishing the Police Oversight Commission. From past experience, this can be a thankless job because someone is going to be disappointed, and we understand that. But I also want to emphasize the positives in that this is groundbreaking for the city of Ann Arbor, certainly long overdue, but I think we have an opportunity here to distinguish ourselves in such a way that we believe others will want to model themselves after us. And I look forward to the commission getting up and running, and those persons who've agreed to serve making that happen. But I also welcome the opportunity to have input as an HRC commissioner when and where I see the need that this and other areas of our city would not only value but welcome input, not only from me as a commissioner, but also from me as an individual and a citizen. So for that reason, I think that this is the first step in this very long process. I think it's important that we devote whatever time is necessary to ensure that it is done right, it's done well, and that in many respects it will speak for itself. So that's all of that factored into my decision in evaluating and assessing the applicants for this commission.
Mohammed.
This process, to me personally, it was a big learning experience. I spent in the last 3 weeks many hours more than maybe 10, 12 hours some days on this process. Just what the commissioner said, I agree with it 100%. My feeling, 6 of us who voted for this, we tried our best to be fair and to be just to everybody. The application, we review 62 applications, are the most interesting application and information really I read in my life, you know. Some of it, I had to read it twice, 3 times, 4 times, before I make my mind even what is the main positive point of that applicant. And to me personally, the most important things I felt about this process, I talked to many people in the community, especially in my own, you know, community in our mosque and in our, you know, Arab groups and this thing. I felt many, many people, they feel this commission is very essential for Ann Arbor. As you know, many of us people who lived in this city, beautiful city, for the last 20, 30, 40, some of us 50 and 60 years, we feel that this is one of the best cities in United States to live in it for many, many reasons, you know. Many of you know about it maybe much more than me. So we felt that we have obligation really to the community at large, you know, be it minority people or majority people, to help and produce a commission to do the difference for our future, for the safety of our community, for everybody, whatever his income level, whatever his education level, whatever his mental level, you know. So I felt that the process really, from all the communication we have between ourselves, the email we sometimes, you know, send to each other to justify a point or make sure about a point that we understand it all correct, you know. I felt that all the people, they are doing their best, you know, to be fair, number one, not to be biased to certain minority or certain group or certain education level, you know. Myself, I thought that it is important for the very first year of the commission, and this is one of the main questions we have for the applicants, you know, what do you see yourself offering, especially in the first year of this commission, to the community? And the response of many, many people, it was, you know, tremendous, really, very fair, and they know the responsibility, they know the degree of trust or untrust the community will have towards this commission in the very first 12 months of their services. And in the same time, you know, most of the people, they show that they respect most of the, you know, police people in this community, you know, and, but there are certain attitude that we want a bit better than what we have already. There are some mistakes. There are some, of course, you know, negative reaction in the certain community, of course, of this city. So we want to overcome that feeling of negative. But we want to be fair to everybody. We are not trying to pick any fight with anybody, you know. So both sides of the issue should be, you know, trusting this commission to oversee what they are doing, especially, again, as I said, in the first year. You know. This is my really, you know, feeling about the whole process. And our chairman, really, she tried to be as fair as she can, educate us how to do it, how to respond, you know, to the question if we are not sure, you know, what the situation. And I think this is as transparent as we could get, really, to the whole community, which is one of our responsibility, I think.
Well, it is interesting to hear that. We hadn't done that before, and I think actually you're getting a very good deal because you're getting I'll tell you what mine is. And I have to admit, I agreed with everybody. The thing that I did differently, of course, is that I'm a management consultant, so I looked at it in a little different way. I see the task for the first 3 years, and I really thought of this as people who should be there the first 3 years, was threefold. It was, some of the mission for this commission is to handle complaints and to deal with specific incidents, and some of it has to do with policy and training and recommendations to the police about how the police can do it better. And the third thing they have to do is get themselves together and gel as a team so that they can make decisions and do the lot of work that none of them have done before and work together well. And I'm thinking, what kind of people are those who can do all of those things? I also think that I'd like to see more use of data and what data tells us about what's going on in the police force. And so I really wanted somebody there who thought that way, because the police don't, right now, they don't have that much data. And they don't use it to make decisions. So I'm thinking people who work well with other people, who've worked together before, people who are open-minded, who will really listen, maybe who have a predisposition to understand the situation, and I wanted some people who had a lot of predisposition so they really understood so they could explain it to the other people, but the people who need people who can listen to that and hear it and respect other people's experiences and understand and try to solve some creativity to solve them. So and then to think about what does this mean in terms of policy and how can we make things better given the concrete examples we have. One of the things we had here was informative, because when we actually looked at, for example, the Blake Transit situation, we pulled it apart, tried to figure out how it could have happened here, what pieces went into that. And once you start doing that, you can use the individual complaints to look at what really happens on the street and how it could be made better. And that's what I'm hoping this commission will do. So I'm looking for that kind of person too, and everybody sort of has talked about pieces of that, and that's what I added. That might be different. So I hope you're, yeah, okay. So we have to decide on a cutoff.
Thank you so much for doing that. And just for the sake of also transparency and recording purposes, and I think this is something you all know, but it was just said a few times. So the ordinance that passed wasn't the task force ordinance.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
So we have to come up with a cutoff point.
Am I right in saying that this whole list is going to be, the whole list is going to be sent to the four of them, or is it just? Okay.
But what I want us to do is say, any part above this is what we really, the people we really, really want. And, yeah, and the other people we do, this is how we scored them, but.
I tend to think that if the four selectors are already getting the full ranked list to begin with, it makes more sense to have a narrower slate of candidates than a larger slate of candidates. If they're already going to be seeing, for example, numbers 20 through 30, we don't need to include 30 out of 62
That's
in
true.
our slate, because
That's
we
true.
will already know that they're number 22 or 23.
Right, so you're saying a cutoff
So
point that's
the-
lower?
It should be lower to like
Okay.
really express our true preference and to really highlight the candidates that there was almost universal acceptance of, or universal enthusiasm for, especially since they will see those people. It's not like they're being given a abbreviated list with only 12 to begin with, right? They'll still know who number 13 is.
Right.
We'll just tell them that these are our first choices in a sense.
Right.
And I think especially since, I understand we got more applications now than we did with the task force, but the task force was a group of 11. This is also going to be a group of 11. Giving our top 28 candidates isn't going to be as helpful, I think, to the four selectors as giving, say, our top 15, which is what we did for the task force.
Okay, so you would suggest a cutoff of about what?
I would suggest actually a cutoff of either 1.6 or 1.7. 1.6 would give us 12 candidates, 1.7 would give us 15.
Other thoughts on that? 1.6 or 1.7, you're saying? Okay.
I would ask for perhaps more than that. I think there's a very narrow bandwidth. There's 11, so I would kindly ask for at least 20,
Of our top,
your top 20.
even though you're getting the entire list with our
With your scores.
recommendations?
I
The only
think
thing
that's-
is that
I
you're-
think, many of the criteria that were talked about by the commissioners are the same criteria we are using. And there are a lot of great names on that list.
Yes.
Sure, I think
And
that,
it's going to be really hard. I think the more the better. I don't think it'd be hard to give us at least 20 good names.
but we're giving you all 62.
Yeah.
We're not just giving you 20. So if we give you all 62 and just put stars next to 12 or 15, it's not like you can't go out of the 15 and look at number 17. You'd have number 17.
I mean, and part of, what this is a ranking of, based on how you scored someone, but our job ultimately, and it's been alluded to this evening, is that we have to create a whole. So if
A
we
mix, yeah.
have, certain individuals who share many similar characteristics, even if they scored higher, we may choose to make a decision based on composition of that group and creating a group that we think will work well together and brings a diversity of ages, backgrounds, skills to the table,
True.
right? So.
And none of that is really an argument for giving you a shortened list, because you'll still have the full list to
Sure,
choose from.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And there just may be,
Well,
there may be people on the list that may have ranked very highly, but I can look at that person and say, that person's never getting approved by Olive Council.
Mhm.
And that's just the way it is, so there's no point.
So that actually makes me think then too, that the city council members who are doing selection should also then maybe post what their assessments are, like if the assessment is like, whether or not politically this person would be voted in,
I
like
am
that should be
not
made
going to
transparent.
publicly state that someone politically would not
No,
vote
I mean,
for
that
council.
would be part of, you would just share that, like, part of your assessment includes that thought. Like,
I can only speak for myself, I would never.
So just similar to what they just did, you would say part of my selection, again, just that these be transparent, if that's how you're assessing people, is whether or not, like, that would be important for the community to know. Just in the same way that it's important to know how they're assessing the people they recommend to you.
Well,
So I'm just saying to
I'm-
continue that transparency, that would be very helpful. And, sorry, I have one last question. Who are you interviewing and how are those selected? Are you interviewing all the people that are?
That's
the
very
next-
different.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So there are no interviews, just applicants? Okay.
The interview is for an actual city employee,
A staff.
a staff member. That would
From
help
the-
both us and the
Gotcha.
ICPOC.
Yeah, that works with Howard and, okay.
So the point was, we have to use our own knowledge sometimes of something that this group might not have been privy to, but I can know, okay, I might like this person, but I know that 3 of my colleagues on council wouldn't put that person through.
Well, certainly that happened here too, but.
I'm very comfortable just turning over this list, period. I mean, because you can see very clearly, the problem with doing a cutoff is they're so close and it's so arbitrary, it's like by one vote off 0.5%. So you're seeing the whole list. So I guess, the only issue, the only why do we need to come up with a cutoff if they're going to have the whole list?
Well, that's a point.
I think part of the reason that it might be nice to come up with a cutoff is because the public wanted to see a slate of candidates from the
Well,
HRC.
we don't know. Are
And we don't,
making
we,
that up?
we didn't
We're-
come up
yeah, I
with a
think
slate of
the-
candidates.
The list has been published, and we're not planning to publish any sort of final list of candidates. It's,
Oh, no, not you, but the HRC could publish its own slate of recommendations,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, but not candidates. I mean, we can't, we could publish 20.
We
We
could.
could.
The problem with doing that is, again, it's not the full story in that the next, say, if we give 20 candidates, the 21st is so darn close that then if the 4 liaisons choose to go with number 21, people are going to say, well, why didn't you choose from 20? And you'll see that they were just so close that it's so arbitrary that makes me either want to turn over the first 30 or none. You know, make public, a much larger list.
Wouldn't that still be the same problem? Isn't there still a slight difference between number 30 and number 31, as there is between number 20 and
Right,
21?
which is why I'm more comfortable just giving them a list and not making anything.
Yes, but if the
We're
community,
just providing input to them. We've told you our criteria, and I'm happy with that, but other people might disagree.
What if, okay,
You know,
excuse me? Oh, no.
Sorry, I just
Yeah.
wonder what the point of HRC spending all this time reviewing anything there was not a slate.
Well,
Well,
we're
why
going to
don't
be
you
an
tell us?
important input.
Sure, I mean, I can see from this, people that they thought were of high value. I can also see folks who they didn't think should be. I can see where opinion coalesces, I can see where it splits. I can also see that, based on some of our preliminary conversations that the four of us has had, that there's a lot of overlap, honestly, between the opinion of it. So I think there's value in that. And that it's, that it's a vetting process, and we've said all along, at least Councilmember Romali and I have said that this is a very important data point for us in making our decision. And I also think that, the commission did an excellent job in creating the application process and reaching out to the community. It's the whole that was the contribution that I'm extremely grateful for. But I can understand the level of discomfort because there were so many excellent applicants, and they are sometimes, we're just talking about 0.1. And I think there might be a number of people, if we say I'm just picking a random number, if we picked number 22 and had a good reason for going with 22, I don't think this group is going to come out with pitchforks and saying, but why didn't you pick 18 instead?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm getting the read of this group, but please tell me if I'm not.
I don't think anyone's concerned with us, our feelings as commissioners. I think the public is concerned that they will lack transparency.
What if afterwards, after they make their decision, we could come up with some kind of a summary? Would that be useful?
I think that might actually be
Worse?
more hurtful in
Oh, okay,
the
we
way,
don't want to do that.
if we go through them and say, we actually hated 8 of you, but we liked 4 of you. That would be not great.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of vulnerability that was asked of the people who applied for this position, and I just want to be protective of that.
I mean, I
And-
think Lauren can speak to this. She was one of the members on the task force. She filled out essentially the same application, and we discussed her application in basically public meetings,
But
along
to-
with everyone else's, and her name appeared on the list, right?
But there's a difference.
So typically for a commission, for every other commission, a person sends in their application, because it's usually the mayor, he makes the decision on his own who gets appointed, who isn't. In this case, the only difference is that instead of the mayor, it's 4 city council members. They're under no obligation to say what criteria they're using. It's up to them to choose, and it isn't really fair to expose 62 people to the publicity that goes with, the sometimes negative publicity that goes with seeing the list and seeing that their name wasn't recommended by the HRC, it's just, I think it's just
I
not
think the word
necessary.
obligation is a really weird word to associate with transparency here, especially since as council
I think we're
member.
trying to protect the rights of citizens. There is a balance that we need to strike between transparency and protecting the rights of our citizens and the people that applied. I just think this fear is completely overblown at this point. If we're all looking at the same set of names, and based on the list of folks that applied, I think this sense of lack of transparency is overblown at this point.
Can I,
You know, and I don't want to marginalize any fears or discount anybody, but there needs to be a balance with trust, transparency, and privacy. It just can't be fully transparent in a sense that exposes the people that applied in a way that negatively impacts their lives for very little, in my opinion at this time, upside. I don't get the major conspiracy theories at this point.
and can I add to this that we've really, this group and others worked hard to recruit members from communities that we have really struggled in the past to get to apply to commissions, and dragging someone's name through the mud doesn't help us in those efforts going forward, where we want to continue to see, not just in this commission, but for me personally, and part of what drives my decision to strike that balance is that I want members from the community that we haven't heard from. This was very exciting to me to see these names on the list, names that I haven't seen before, that, we struggle to find representation in so many of our committees and commissions. And so I don't want, if someone isn't selected, and the vast majority of applicants won't be selected, I don't want it to be a discouraging, negative experience that would keep someone from saying, well, I never want to try to do this again.
I'm wondering if it would feel more transparent if we could say at the end, after the 4 liaisons have made the decision and they've been passed by city council, if we could say that 20% were from our first 10 scores or something. I mean, for transparency, so that people at least know that we had agreement, if that's really what the issue is. And I don't know what the real issue is. Yeah.
I don't know that, I've been sitting here listening to the comments. We had 62 applicants, 63. 52 are not going to be selected. I mean, that's the reality. So someone's going to be disappointed. There are going to be many people who are going to be disappointed if they are not selected in this initial groundbreaking, very important decision-making effort. I think what I've shared with fellow commissioners is the fact that we certainly want to commend every applicant who has expressed interest. I think it's important that we emphasize the fact that those who may not be selected doesn't mean that they are not appreciated, and that their efforts that they engaged in to be considered did not fall on deaf ears, and it's not in any way a negative that they are not selected. This is not, as has been stated before, a one-shot deal. We need to ensure that the important thing here is to not only ensure that this commission is ultimately established, but that the very important work that we want this commission to do commences. So while we're not going to, in the infamous words of Johnny Cochran, rush to judgment in making the decision to establish the commission, I think the efforts that have been engaged in to date and those that will continue going forward, that process has to be respected. There are going to be people who will be disappointed, especially because all of us know someone of those applicants. And while we may have preferred that those that we evaluated be on this commission, it doesn't mean that in subsequent efforts to fill vacancies they cannot be. It simply means that this initial effort has to commence in order for this process to begin. And so with that, I'm a little confused as to, even if we were transparent in publishing, as has been requested, the information, it may satisfy some, but there is nothing that is going to please all. And I think we need to be cognizant of that.
So that's not what I was requesting,
And
like,
I'm
to
not saying
publicize
that you,
the applicants.
I'm not saying that you are. I'm simply speaking generally. This process has taken 4 years to get to this point. We need to move on, get this up and running, live with whatever we've made. I didn't like some of the decisions that have occurred even all along in the process, and I've been, with the exception of one other person, involved in just about every aspect of it. But at some point, I'm going to use an old Southern expression that my grandmother used to say: we need to stop riding Ghana and start doing. We've been riding Ghana for 4 years. Let's get it done and move forward. And we can tweak it, we can evaluate it, we can assess it, you can use whatever adjective you want to put in there. But let's get this process moving forward so that we can start doing the more important work, which is the basis for even establishing this commission.
And just, I think the concern of the community would be is that if it appears that 4 city council members chose on their own volition without sharing their assessment or what they're looking for or how they're looking for them, that would look very concerning, especially at the experience with the task force. So the idea that HRC would recommend a certain slate, knowing it's a larger group of people who are, representing the community, if those recommendations were shared with the community and we could see how city council handled that, we could see how the 4 people on city council are making those assessments, if they share those assessments. Again, these are the kinds of things that will build trust as you develop, and if you want to start it out well, you really want to start it with trust. And the whole point is for people from the community to come to the commission, and if there's no trust in the way that they were selected, then that will be a bad start. So I agree with you, we want to get it started and off the ground, and we want to do that in a way that's transparent, that gives the community trust in the people who have been selected. And I understand that people say everyone is really great, and that's fabulous, but the way you narrow that list down matters, and how you're doing that, and your thought process with doing that matters, and just to inform people of how you're doing that. And I do recommend the HRC offering their recommendations, even if the council members still can make their own minds. Again, that can also be transparent to the community. HRC recommended this slate, and the city council members chose this. Great, all transparent. Just make that public. That's all.
We have made ours public, and I think we've done what we've made our stance, how we've chosen, what our criteria were. We've made that public. And I think I'm not sure we're going to gain anything from any of this. I think
there's a lot to be gained in engaging in this and releasing a public slate. I think that throughout this whole process and the whole process of creating the ICPOC, I think that a lot of important stakeholders have felt like there hasn't been transparency, that their views haven't been respected, and I think that engaging in a more transparent process would help a lot of people begin to trust this whole situation again.
I'm not sure anybody's going to be happy if we have 20 people, if we give us a slate of 20 people and they choose 19 of them, there's going to be anger. And we are not the selectors. And we don't. They are the selectors. They have a right to not listen to all 20 of ours, or all 15 of ours, or all, what we're doing is making a situation, I think, that will always get us into trouble and always
I think
fail
what
to,
if I can interject, I think what we're trying to establish here is a commission that can stand the test of time, that can stand the test of people, influences, politics, and such. I mean, so, you know, the ordinance spells out a lot of the criteria and the requirements. And the commissioners have all spoken very well to the criteria that they use to assess the candidates and put forth who they think is the strongest choices. And I think after you get to about, 25, those are very good names and a very good pool of people. And to say, well, we're going to give you 15, you got to choose 11. I mean, I just think that to me, there's another 15 out there that are very equally qualified, and we're trying to find a skill set that is balanced in a mix, and people who are vested in their community, have been here for a while. So there isn't an algorithm that we can apply to this. I mean, if there was, we wouldn't be debating any of this. We could just put it in a simple algorithm and say, spit out the top 11 or 15, and that would be the case, and we can say
Right.
we're fully transparent.
It's just about transparency, however you do it.
I think everyone is striving to do that at the same time, protecting the process. And, we talk about trust, but I just feel like, we just need to have a little bit of trust here to get this thing off the ground, and to know that, to be honest, and I keep coming back to it, that the list in the pool of candidates is impressive. And this ordinance spells out, criteria. And there is no bait and switch with us four who are choosing the names. There's no alternative list that we're gonna,
That happened before.
yeah. I can, second what Councilmember Grand said. No, there is not another name that we're looking at. There isn't a single name, a single person that has been,
And if you do things transparently, then people will be
you know,
able to watch that.
and, I think that was part of the idea of listing those initial names. So people know that, these are the folks that applied, and we're not going to pull some names out of our bag later in the 11th hour. And I think, those concerns are valid, and they're stated, they're on record, and if that happens, then, I think, obviously, like you said, they're on record. But that's not the current case. And again, the criteria spelled out in the ordinance eliminated some people, and then you're looking for people who are, vested in the community. And that eliminates a bunch of other people, and then you're starting to look for a good mix of folks and different skill sets. And it's not about, well, this person's not, is cancerous and this and that. And there's been, in the talks that I've been having with community members and people, that's not the case. And so I just want to go on record and say that. And, I think, again, we're setting up a commission that can stand the test of time. And we all want to model for for not just our community, but for the country. And we can have other communities look to Ann Arbor for the social justice that, we were known for in the past and will be known for again. And I think this is a great opportunity to put ourselves back on the map. When we start, so it's again, I want to have a commission that is not dependent on any one person or any two people. I want it to stand the test of time. And I think, fortunately, we have, in the first crop of applications, the people to do that.
do we have a proposal? Mr. Harmon?
I think if I come to compromise, we talk about this 1.9 versus 2.0 and, 1, 2, 3 and these things. And from what Ali's saying, they want a little bit more number to select from. we 6 commissioners, we selected almost 20, 25 out of 62. If we give them those 20, 25, whatever it is, 1.9 or 2,
Yes,
and they select 11 out of
23.
25, so it will be 10 people really put their input into this thing. Now, the comment Ali said that they are not going to go to number 62 and pick him up, the selector, because 6 of us, we thought that 62 is, you know, it's not going to add anything to the commission. You know, this is our criteria for number 3, right? So if we give them 25 and let them select 11 out of this 25,
so 1.9 cutoff.
1.9,
That's 23.
2 is 28.
yeah.
Yes,
That
1.9 is
means
23.
Really, 10 people selected those.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So the people, like, you
saying
know,
either
what you
20
said, you know,
20
there will be some people disappointed. No question about it. Whatever formula you are going to use.
Right.
But if we put ourselves as 6 people totally, you know, we don't know most of those people. We just read their application, what they wrote there, and we selected 25 out of those.
Yeah,
Then out of those 25, the selector come for council people and select 11 out of those. To me, this is one of the more fair way to do it, you know.
okay. So you're proposing that we choose either 1.9 or 1.8? Or
Or
2.0, okay.
Yeah, 1.9 or 2.
Well, we could do that, a cutoff point like that, and we could either list those people, maybe not in order, in alphabetical order, those 20 people or 20 or 30 people. I think that would give them some of what they wanted.
Right,
Is that a proposal?
yeah.
You want to come up with a number? Anybody else? A discussion on
I'm
it.
still in favor of not making our list of recommendations public, but if we do, if there's a consensus to do that, then I would say we should go with, I think it's 28, so up to
It is, it's
2.0.
28 if it's 2.0.
Yeah, 2.0 is reasonable.
Vivian?
I'm in favor of a public slate. I'd prefer lower cutoff, but if people are willing to do a public slate with 2.0, I'm okay with 2.0.
Pam?
I think we would, I'm not opposed to the slate being made public. What I think I'm opposed to is when.
Is when?
When.
When?
When.
Oh, okay. Which means what? You mean when
I
we give
think-
the slate, before or after?
Because, as I've said before, we're not going to please everyone. And I think even by doing that, depending on the time, we're creating a problem that does not currently exist because it's unknown. Once it's published, you can't recall that. And then I think it pits us against city council
That is that's a
with
problem.
them versus us,
Yeah.
and I don't like that.
So you'd be willing to
I don't
you
see
would
what's
be okay
gained.
with this if we did it afterwards?
Yes.
If the question came up?
Yes, if it came up, but I think, so that's why I said I'm not opposed to it, only because I'm all for transparency. What I am opposed to is when.
Other comments about that? Are you, would you rather have it available afterwards?
I prefer it before, but after is fine with me too.
Mohammed?
Well, Mohammed, do you think that it should be public, made public, our recommendation, the names?
It's really, up to the council people what they want to do with it, you know.
Okay? So
If they are not going to say which name they refuse and just publish the 11 names they selected and that's it, then we should not publish ours too. Are you going to tell people whom you disregard? Or just you are going to publish the 11 members you
Yeah.
you selected?
We're not gonna make subsequent lists. I mean, we made the initial,
And
and then we'll
And then
make
you
the
make a
final,
list
and
of
that's it.
11.
There's not gonna be, and I think what Commissioner Pam said is correct, is that we're gonna be pitting this commission against council, and we're not gonna be working together, and we're sowing the seeds of doubt, poisoning the well. And, you know, do we want this to work? You know, of course we do, and we need to be sensible about it, and I just don't really see a whole lot of upshot on pitting the folks against each other in this case. I just don't, I don't know what the motive is. I just, again, I operate from good faith and trust, and I think that's how we should be operating. And if we're gonna operate thinking everyone, you know, is out for something different, then you know, it's gonna be a lot harder to get anything done.
I mean, I guess I can say that there are 4 council members, right? So only 2 of them are at this table, and so I can only advocate
Sure.
for my own. I can't, you know, and it's 1 out of 4 votes to get to that point, and then it's 1 out of 11 votes to get to the final point. So I don't try to overstate my own influence in this process, but what I can tell you is based on the cutoff that has been discussed and that we've gone through sort of a similar process at this point, that there's a lot of congruence between your cutoff and sort of where our list stands. It's not 1-to-1, but eyeballing it, I would say we're kind of at about 85%. So I don't know if that gives this group more confidence or less, but that's, I do want to be really open with this group in particular. It's not about, you know, one voice from the community. That doesn't represent the entire community. And so but I also don't, you know, I share all these concerns, but at the same time, you know, you are your own commissioner. You should make your decision. And I didn't have my mic on, and I apologize.
Okay.
So it sounds like what we could do is decide later about making it public after you've made your.
I was thinking about that, too.
And, you know, if it's in the best of all possible worlds, there will be really a lot of congruence
Yes.
between our top 30 and then,
And I think if there is, we can
Yeah.
actually say, there's a lot of congruence.
Right.
And if there's not, we probably will have if there's no congruence, we probably will have
There
some
will not be,
questions. So,
There will, yeah.
but let's not build in this conflict between City Council and the Human Rights Commission. We don't have to build it in right now. It may not happen, and that would be good.
My fears will dissipate once, you know, the deadline has passed and publishing them later, as Commissioner Dent has said. You know, in terms of transparency, that's great, you know. But again, I keep going back to this, having confidence and faith and trust. I mean, you got to, and obviously you need transparency, but we talked about the criteria, and once the names get published and names are selected and approved, people are going to go back and they're going to, you know, look at those people and put upon the criteria that we discussed here tonight against those folks, and there will be scrutiny and there will be challenges made if we didn't match up what we talked about, what our criteria here today were, and we're putting in some ringers on the commission. That's not the case. So, you know, So I just, again, just wanted to chime in one last time.
Okay. Well, now, so there is a proposal on the floor, and are you willing to withdraw it for the time being? Because question, I don't think there's a need for a cutoff if we're not going to publish anything. So we know what is the likely cutoff if we have it, and if they don't come up with any, let's see what it happens. And publish afterwards. Vivian, are you comfortable with that?
It's not what I prefer, but there aren't votes for it, so there's
But
nothing I can do.
we'll try, I think we all care about the transparency. What you don't want is so much transparency that we're already starting a fight before there's a need for it. So what we're saying is, let's see what happens, and then we'll do what we have to do. We'll talk about it. So are you comfortable taking your proposal off the table for now? Okay. Okay. Is there anything else? Like another proposal? Then we can, we probably would like to know some idea about how long you think it's going to be before you have what are your plans?
Well, we have a couple more meetings scheduled for the rest of this month, and I think we'll have, our final list along. Obviously, we wanted to wait for this to occur before we go any further. But, we're on track, I think, as a group, where we have a lot of the same, ideas and thoughts and preferences, and so I don't see no delay in this process. I think we should have our names selected by March 1st.
Okay. If there's anything that we can do to help you, let us know.
Well, obviously, get us, your recommendations as a group. We haven't seen it. Be open if we have questions once we do see that, to get some clarifications. There is one question that came up, I think, in the ordinance. It calls for, no city employees to, nobody that's been a city employee
Right.
recently to be eligible. And there is some folks who were election workers that applied.
Oh, right.
So,
Margaret identified who they were, and you're going through with trying to get an amendment to that.
yeah,
ordinance so
I
that
think
That was,
there will probably be something more broad and less specific, stating that any, nomination can be approved in those kind of cases with the 7 vote on council. So if there were 7 members on council who wanted to waive those requirements, that would be allowed just in the case of residency or some other exception.
okay.
I would just like to add, if anyone, I'm going to turn my mic on this time. If anyone has feedback that they thought was useful from the community, that they'd like to share with us as we're making our deliberations. So we've gotten pretty limited feedback so far from other members of the community. So however you want to share that,
Okay,
if you are hearing things that you think we should know,
we will.
positive or negative, I would really appreciate that, because that's going to be part of our discussions going forward.
It would also help if you did a check with us down the line somewhere, where you have specific ideas and you wonder if what we know about them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback that I've been getting was positive. Hey, this person is really strong, this person's really great.
Sure.
There hasn't been anybody come in with any bad news
There-
for us to
there
look
will
at. Just
be.
really just positive things to say. And again, really great group of folks, and we're lucky to have a community so rich and talented, and just hope to have more diversity, like you said. There were a couple minority groups not represented in the applications, and hopefully we can get the word out to those other communities to get involved.
Well, I think when they see how it works for other people, there are reasons why they're not involved, I think, especially for the Hispanic community. And again, trust has to be established. But we will work to get them there.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.